I'm Liz Gordaham from PikaPikaDesign.net. I've been trying to find some new ways to use recycled materials in art and craft, and I've been making these bowls out of recycled paper. A lot of people have asked me how I make them, so I'm going to share my process with you. Okay, so let's talk about materials. What kind of material are you going to need to make a recycled paper bowl? Well, obviously you're going to need some kind of paper to recycle. And that could be any kind of household waste paper you have lying around, like say paper bags or your junk mail. But what I prefer to use is the compressed paper packaging material that you'll get when you order something online, or it comes packed with your toaster oven. What other materials do we need to make our bowls? Well, we're making a bowl, so we need some sort of bowl-shaped mold. So what I've done is I've just found a bowl about the size that I want my bowl to be, and I've covered it in saran wrap just to make sure that the paper doesn't stick too closely to this bowl. It makes it easier to get it off in the end. You're also going to need a blender. You're going to need a basin of water, and you're going to want a couple inches of water in here, and preferably warm water. You're also going to need some sort of tray to work on. You're going to need some simple paper making tools, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, and some other handy tools, a sponge, and a couple pieces of felt. So what I like to do to make my bowls a little bit more personal is to line them with old maps. What I'm going to use today is a New York City Metro map. And what I've done is I've just cut my map to make sure that it's just a little bit bigger than my bowl, so you can see the edges will wrap around. So the first step is to cover your bowl with your map. So what you're going to need is get your tray out here, so you have a work surface, and your bowl. And I like to just set my map into the water for a couple seconds just to make the paper a little bit more pliable. So I've got my wet map, and I'm just going to drape it face down over the bowl. And you just want to do a little finagling with the edges. I like to pinch them in and fold them so that you sort of get the map nice and draped to the shape of the bowl. So your next step is you're going to want to make your paper bowl to cover the bowl. You're going to want pieces about 1 inch square. You want to put some pieces of paper into your blender, and you want to cover them with water. And I'm just going to start blending at the lowest setting so that I don't burn out the blender, since it's going to be working pretty hard. Okay, you'll know your pulp is ready when you scoop it out, and you can just squeeze some of the water out, and you can see that it's sort of a loose, putty-like consistency. So I've got my paper making tools, and all this is 2 frames of wood, one with a piece of window screening taped to it, and then the second frame just sits on top and keeps your pulp in place and gives you a manageable sized piece of paper to work with. So what I'm going to do is I just submerge both pieces into the water. I want to do this at an angle so I don't get any bubbles, air bubbles beneath the screen. And I'm just going to scoop a couple handfuls of paper pulp here into my frame. And I'm just going to swish the pulp around with my fingers to make sure it's evenly distributed within the frame, and pull that up out of the water and let it drain. I'm going to take my frame off the top and grab a piece of felt. Should just lay across the top here. And I'm just going to squeeze some of that extra water out. That makes it a little easier to work with. So once I've got that water squeezed out, I'm going to keep the felt on top of the screen. Just flip it over and grab my sponge. And I'm just going to sponge along the inside of the screen, again, just to get a little bit more of that water out. So what I have here now is basically a piece of paper. If I were to just let this dry as it is, it would be a nice thick piece of cardstock that I could, make a greeting card out of or whatever I want. But instead, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to flip it over onto my bowl and pull the felt away. And so you can see I have this just draped right over my form. Now I'm just going to take my hands and just help it take the shape of the bowl. And if you got a little extra on the edges, don't worry about it. Just rip it off and set it aside. And just use your hands to form the bowl. So I can see that I've got a little blank space here, so I'm just going to take one of these scraps that I pulled off the edge before, and I'm just going to add that in, and just giving it a little pat helps the pulp take hold to what's already there. So now my whole bowl is covered in paper pulp. Now I'm just going to grab 2 more pieces of felt. I'm going to fold them in half. So I have some dry felt here, and take one in each hand, and just cradle the bowl in my palms, and press and spin with the bowl. And don't worry about a little extra along the edges, because we'll just take that off later when it's dry. So we just set this aside to dry. So while that bowl dries, I have another bowl here that I made yesterday. It's all dry. You can see it's a bigger bowl. You can make whatever size bowl you want. So you can see it's dry to the touch. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to release it from my mold bowl. It should come off pretty easily. Now I want to get rid of all these jagged edges. So I'm just going to do this really simply. I'm just going to grab a pair of scissors and just start cutting along the edge of the bowl. Okay, so there you have your bowl. What I have here is a soy-based acrylic varnish. Now you can really use anything, but what I like about the soy-based product is that, you know, it's not petroleum-based, so it's a little better for the environment. It's non-toxic, and it's very low VOC. So all in all, it's just healthier for me to use, it's healthier for the environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint the inside of the bowl, the acrylic. And I like to do about 3 coats of finish, just to make sure I get a really nice, thick finish on there. And I also like, when I get to the edges, to just run the brush along the seam there, and that sort of helps to seal the map to the rest of the paper. So here's our finished product, our little New York Metro map bowl. But remember, you can do whatever you want with these bowls. You don't need to put a map inside. You don't have to use the brown packing material. You can use any kind of paper you have lying around the house.